Well, next on the 208, we are following a major development out of the Boise Police Department. Investigative reporter Alexandra Duggan found that 9 BPD officers filed complaints against Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee. Complaints about Lee paint a picture of a hostile work environment that pushed longtime BPD officers out of the force.
7 investigators got their hands on this memo, and it was recommended in this memo that Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee be put on administrative leave. But after this memo came out, he was not. The head of Boise's Office of Police Accountability wrote the memo to Mayor McLean on April 5th of this year. Investigative reporter Alexandra Duggan spoke with some officers who spurred the writing of the memo.
Boise's Office of Police Accountability conducted an investigation into Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee after 9 officers filed complaints against him. Those complaints detailed a hostile work environment, name-calling, and nepotism. Human Resources sent the officers to Internal Affairs to file their complaints. But because Lee oversees Internal Affairs, the officers thought they couldn't trust the department and went to the Office of Police Accountability instead. Jesus Hara with the OPA recommended in a memo to Mayor McLean that Lee be placed on leave. He also recommended a third party do more interviews with the officers for the investigation. The follow-up interviews never happened, according to former BPD Captain Matt Bringleson.
To my knowledge, it didn't happen. I certainly wasn't interviewed again, so they may have just gotten rid of that idea altogether, but I didn't get talked to again.
He was one of the officers who filed a complaint this spring. He noted many reasons, but said the last straw was feeling like he was being pushed out.
So I served the city of Boise for almost 25 years, quarter century, over half my life. And it got to a point where I just couldn't come in every day anymore because it was just so hostile and caustic, and it was just impossible to function. So I got to a point where I had to reach out and get professional mental health counseling. And when I came back, I was being asked regularly, hey, how much longer are you going to stay? When are you going to quit? How much longer are you going to stay? It was clear that I wasn't wanted there anymore.
Former Captain Tom Fleming also felt like he was being pushed out and that his ideas and experience was unneeded. Fleming does not want his face on camera because of the job he's currently working.
I was in a meeting with the chief, and we were talking about an internal investigation, and he said, this is the way I want this done, and I wasn't really on board with it. I kind of put up a little bit of resistance, just professionally, just told him that the reason it was being done this way was this, and he said, I want it done this way, and that's it. And if this gets to be too much for you, you can go to Percy and look at your retirement options.
Boise Mayor Lauren McLean told KTVB in an exclusive interview Friday that the department is asking for change.
Along with change, when we're asking officers to change the way they do some of their practices and to accept reforms that the council have passed, like no-knock warrants, strangleholds, use of force, body cams, and new training protocols, we need management that supports that change.
McLean said the public can be assured that they are still safe.
I can assure you, and I want to assure the public, that we're getting to the bottom of this. We're asking many questions. We've actively reviewed reports we've received, have commissioned third-party reviews, and provided and received feedback. We've looked at policies that needed change, and we've set management expectations and will hold management accountable.
The mayor's chief of staff, Courtney Washburn, said the city did do its own investigation. In a statement to 7 Investigates, Washburn said she reviewed the information and asked for a third-party opinion. She wrote, that independent investigation determined that there was no violation of city or BPD policy or procedure that would support the action of administrative leave in regards to the chief of police. The investigation also indicated that several complaints were already under investigation by other agencies and or the Office of Internal Affairs. Bringleson said that 5 officers left under Lee, wiping out an entire command staff. And morale, Fleming said, seemed terribly low under the chief.
I had rank and file officers from guys that had been there for a couple years or less, all the way up to 25-year officers, to sergeants, lieutenants, other command members, and professional staff members, civilian employees of our department that would come in and literally sit in my office and cry about things that were going on.
In Fleming's 30-year career, he has never seen any officer continue working pending an investigation, criminal or not.
When this happened and he was not suspended, that really blew up the amount of people coming to my office and complaining, want to know why we had a particular employee who had done allegedly done something. He was suspended for this alleged crime, but why is the chief not? And the only thing I could tell them is that when this first started, is the explanation that was given to me from city legal was that the chief has a different boss than the rest of you.
And Alexandra Duggan joins us live here on the 208. And Alex, I want to dig into some of the stuff you talked about in your story. Some might say that the officers that spoke to you and that complained, maybe they have an axe to grind. Maybe they have a personal problem with Chief Lee. Maybe there's only a couple of people that just didn't like the way the chief was really doing things when he came here from Portland. What insight do you have on that conversation about this being system-wide or a few people with an axe to grind?
Well, Joe, it's not just a couple officers who are disgruntled or upset. This is a lot of officers that have an issue with the alleged name-calling and belittling and hostile work environment that is taking place. And I mean, Tom Fleming even said these officers would come into my office and cry. They would just cry to me about this. And, you know, they felt that their concerns weren't being heard or wouldn't be heard because just of the politics surrounding the chief coming in from Portland.
And we're staying on top of that breaking news just into our newsroom. Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee has resigned from his position with the Boise Police Department. It's effective next month on October 14th, and the resignation comes at the request of Boise Mayor Lauren McLean. It also comes just 24 hours after KTVB's investigative reporter Alexandra Duggan her report about Chief Lee and the complaints within the department. Lee will be on leave for the rest of his tenure. McLean has appointed retired officer Ron Weiniger as acting chief. And a lot of people are talking about this tonight. Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee has resigned from his position effective October 14th. And tonight, the public information officer for the city of Boise sent out this statement saying it became clear to the mayor the department needed different leadership.
I know that everybody's really concerned. They want to know more about this issue. I want to know more as well.
Community focus is still on the Boise Police Department days after Police Chief Ryan Lee was asked to resign by Mayor Lauren McLean.
For the first time since the mayor asked Lee to resign, Boise City Council met earlier for a regularly scheduled meeting.
No public action was taken related to Lee and BPD, and City Council really didn't reference the resignation in their public part of their meeting today. City Council did go into executive session to talk about a personnel matter, but members of the council are not able to elaborate beyond that because it's a private session. We asked them to talk with us about moving forward and taking inventory on Boise Police and human resources processes. Councilmember Jimmy Halliburton told us he was surprised to see the news of Chief Lee's resignation on Monday after a weekend away. He said he had a positive relationship with Lee.
Halliburton says no BPD officers ever reached out to him about issues with the department or the chief over the last couple years, but he couldn't speak for other council members. While City Council works to learn more about the situation, Halliburton says they'll take a look at accountability processes related to investigating complaints made against the chief.
I think all the council members would say that they would like to know more, and that's a hard balance to find between the mayor's office of management of personnel and the council's member of oversight. I would support us making sure that we really take a close look at our systems that are in place and seeing if there was anything wrong, and if there was anything wrong with our system, if we realize that something should have been done different along the way, that we make sure that we address that in policy.
Halliburton says he has heard concerns from the community about the future of Boise Police and public safety in Boise. He assures the community that Boise has a good police department that will be in good hands.
Coming up tonight on the news at 10, Boise's police chief was asked to resign more than a week ago. Tonight, hear from the woman who used to help hold police accountable and her take on the resignation. Natalie Camacho Mendoza worked for the Office of Police Oversight from 2015 to 2021 when she resigned. That year, the city changed the name to the Office of Police Accountability.
Well, I think when I first heard about it,
When the former director of Boise's Office of Police Oversight learned Police Chief Ryan Lee had resigned amid complaints within the department, she had questions.
My big question at that point was, how was that handled? Was there an investigation? Clearly there was a file open.
Emails from a BPD source earlier this year show HR received complaints from multiple officers claiming Chief Lee verbally abused them. HR sent the officers to Internal Affairs to voice their concerns, but since Chief Lee oversaw Internal Affairs, they went to the Office of Police Accountability. Mendoza says when she directed the Office of Police Oversight, she did parallel investigations with HR because each department dealt with different policy violations.
How I would have thought things would have happened is when the officers went to HR, that HR would have opened up an investigation.
She says she was surprised to hear about a written memo addressed to Boise Mayor Lauren McLean from the Office of Police Accountability. It recommended Lee be placed on leave pending an investigation into the verbal abuse complaints. Mendoza was also surprised Lee wasn't placed on leave during a separate criminal investigation for allegedly injuring an officer during a briefing. Lee was never charged.
If a police officer had been under a criminal investigation, whatever it may be, the department put those people on paid administrative leave while the investigation was going.
What about just like not criminal, but this separate investigation?
Okay, the employment, that would be an HR decision.
But then what happens when HR doesn't investigate it?
Well, that's an issue because the Office of Police or any oversight would not have jurisdiction over human resources.
Welcome to the news at 6. 7 Investigates sat down with Boise Mayor Lauren McLean this afternoon, almost 2 weeks after the mayor asked the police chief to resign. McLean admitted to us today she learned about issues officers had with Chief Lee back in February. So we asked why she requested he step down so many months later. She said she, as his boss, worked with him on his communication and management style, and so did the union. But their efforts weren't working. So KTVB's story came out, and then the mayor said she didn't think he could successfully lead when those personnel issues, which were private, became public. Why didn't you place Chief Lee on leave pending the criminal investigation? That seems unprecedented. When you look at other departments, anytime like an officer that we've seen is being investigated criminally, not just IA, they're placed on leave. So did you not have policies in place to kind of govern that, or why did you decide not to do that?
So it was an investigation and not a charge, and it's within the discretion of his manager and myself, and I opted, because in this department it was important to have leadership. We had no internal grounds to take action, and it was within my discretion, and I chose to have him remain on duty.
McLean says that third party also found the city needed to create policies and procedures to build accountability within BPD, especially when it comes to department leadership. Moving forward, she says council will try to clarify where exactly officers should take their complaints and who investigates. Is it HR, internal affairs, or the OPA? Plus, he read the complaints and reflected on how it was all handled. More than 3 weeks since Boise's police chief handed over his badge, a Boise City Council member reflects on what led up to that resignation. It's been a little more than 3 weeks since Boise Mayor Lauren McLean asked her police chief to step down. It came after 7 Investigates story brought to light officers' complaints against Chief Ryan Lee. For the first time, we're hearing from a Boise City Council member after they read through all those complaints.
What does it look like to hold a high-ranking police officer accountable in Boise?
It's definitely a gray area situation. There are policies and procedures for various city departments and various city personnel in various different ways. It gets murkier and more challenging as you get up to the higher levels of leadership.
Laid out in the city's standard of conduct, certain harsh, derogatory language and treatment are unacceptable.
It talks about, hey, this language is unacceptable, this is unacceptable, X, Y, and Z. And a lot of the things that were unacceptable in that are the things that these officers were saying that they were, the ways that they were being treated. So, I mean, why was that not addressed? Like, if there was no policy violation, as I've been told, but it's right there, I mean, where's the line?
It's a good question and a tough question for me to answer as somebody with a responsibility to personnel information.
Do you believe that OPA did the correct process of what they were supposed to do in this situation, in taking the complaints, recommending something, doing that intake, and writing up kind of what was supposed to be done or what they thought was supposed to be done? Was that kind of in their bounds?
So did OPA do the correct thing by receiving complaints? Absolutely, 100%. You don't know what color a complaint is until you see what the complaint is. Could we have done a better job at directing or moving different types of complaints to different types of city, different organs of the city government? That is exactly what the council is, I think, looking at and trying to sort out with clearer policies and procedures.
The mayor never briefed City Council on asking Lee to resign, so City Council was scrambling to figure out what happened. She said in hindsight, she regrets that.
Today, Boise's mayor announced details of the former police chief's severance package. Ryan Lee resigned last month after a KTVB investigation into officer complaints against Lee. His severance includes 9 months of salary and health insurance.
And we begin with this. This is new at 4. A former Boise police officer filed a lawsuit against the city of Boise for failing to protect employees when complaints were filed against former Boise police chief Ryan Lee. The lawsuit, filed on November 8th, says the city of Boise violated the Protection of Public Employees Act. This comes from failing to step in when officers came forward with complaints about the former chief allegedly harassing them.
We begin the news at 6 with a former Boise police officer suing the city of Boise. He claims the city did not protect its employees when they went to the city with issues about the former police chief, Ryan Lee. 7 Investigates' Alexandra Duggan has been following this story for 7 months now. She went through this lawsuit earlier. Alex, this officer wants the city to pay him for money he says he lost out on when he quit his job.
Morgan, former Internal Affairs Captain Tom Fleming filed this lawsuit Tuesday in Ada County. He alleges the city violated the Protection of Public Employees Act when 9 officers feared retaliation and harassment after filing complaints against Lee, and the city didn't protect them because they didn't put Lee on leave. As we previously reported, the Office of Police Accountability recommended the mayor put Lee on leave while a third party investigated the complaints. Those complaints allege harassment and a hostile workplace. One day after we published a story about this in September, Mayor Lauren McLean asked Lee to resign. In Fleming's lawsuit, he claims the city was complicit when it came to how Lee allegedly treated his employees and that the chief was causing emotional distress. In an interview with 7 Investigates last month, the mayor told us she didn't see the need to place Lee on leave and was working with him on better management style. Fleming's lawsuit also says the city squashed officers' ability to even report violations of city rules and regulations. Fleming went to a city attorney about an incident where Lee allegedly hurt an officer and asked them to put him on leave while Idaho State Police investigated it. But he says the attorney told him, quote, "The chief has a different boss than the rest of you." Ultimately, Lee was never charged criminally. The lawsuit claims the former chief and the city staff interfered with ongoing investigations into employee misconduct. Fleming says he was investigating a Boise PD officer's involvement in an off-duty shooting, but Lee told him to stop investigating. His lawsuit also says Lee forced Fleming and other officers to retire against their will.
And tonight, the director of the Office of Police Accountability is on paid administrative leave. Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on the News at 10. I'm Shira Matsuzawa. Boise Mayor Lauren McLean and some members of the Boise City Council placed the OPA director, Jesus Hara, on administrative leave today, effective immediately. They say it's in response to ongoing concerns over professional judgment and lack of confidence in the actions of the office. In a statement, Mayor McLean and 3 members of Boise City Council said, quote, "This step is necessary to protect the interests of our police officers and the public." But just hours after that announcement, an attorney for Hara issued a statement saying in part the city's issuance of a press release within minutes of placing him on paid leave is not only irregular but inconsistent with city policy. It also says it's nothing but, quote, "a calculated political stunt." Hara's attorneys also say he has acted with the utmost diligence and integrity.
It's a multi-layered story of litigation that goes to the highest levels of city government. It's a lot. And the latest layer, laid out after the person who's supposed to hold Boise police accountable, is put on leave late last week. We must have confidence in this office and trust the judgment of its director, said Mayor McLean and council leadership. This step is necessary to protect the interest of our police officers and the public. There was no mention of why he was being put on leave, citing personnel issues. So if you're thinking of the timing of this announcement is kind of curious, well, so are we. It was a discussion we wanted to have with our investigative reporter, Alex Duggan, who told us today the OPA director, Jesus Hara, filed a grievance with the city just prior to this forced leave.
So the statement that his attorney released that night on Friday says that he can't comment publicly on the nature of previously filed grievances. So that means that Jesus has filed a grievance with the city or whoever in some capacity, and he's alleging concerns of retaliation, violations of law, and breach of contract by the city of Boise. So there's nothing he can say about any previously filed grievances, but it says that he does have them. So it's interesting to note that according to this, he filed a grievance, and then now he's on leave.
But was he out of scope?
Well, I mean, the ordinance that they came up with, the city came up with when they were readjusting the office, when Jesus actually started his job in the summer of 2021, was the Office of Police Accountability can develop specific recommendations as to the policies, procedures, practices of BPD officers and the employees. The director may make recommendations to the chief of police, the mayor, or city council as appropriate. Well, he did that like he does with every complaint he investigates, anything like that. And the mayor said he was kind of unauthorized in this way to do so. And it is, unique because normally we wouldn't see BPD officers complaining to the Office of Police Accountability. It's usually for officer-involved shootings and citizen complaints.
Sure.
So it's really, really unique. Well, we know that these officers and other employees that made the complaints didn't want to go to the Internal Affairs Office because Chief Lee oversaw internal affairs, so they thought that that was a conflict of interest. And they also alleged that HR didn't want to investigate this either, so then they didn't have anywhere else to go, so they went to the Office of Police Accountability, who thought that maybe this office can hold the chief accountable.
I assume you've reached out to the city to find out more information about this. They have been basically saying we can't say anything?
So I actually haven't gotten really a response from the city yet. What they did tell me was, hey, this is personnel. We can't speak about this. They also can't speak about pending litigation. They can't speak. And we know that we don't know the nature of Jesus' personal grievances, but this could definitely snowball into something bigger.
Plus, as Boise City Council is set to meet in executive session tomorrow morning, new records shed light on what led to the suspension of the director of the Office of Police Accountability. Okay, now to a 7 Investigates update. The Boise City Council is meeting in executive session tomorrow morning to take up a personnel matter about a week after the mayor and council suspended the Office of Police Accountability Director. A city spokesperson won't say, however, whether the meeting has to do with Jesus Hara's employment. Meantime, 7 Investigates reporter Alexandra Duggan and I obtained records from the city today showing 3 council members, the mayor, and her chief of staff recently met with Hara and his staff on November 22nd. Paraphrased meeting notes show the issue of whether the OPA could watch officers' body camera footage live was brought up multiple times. Hara told them neither he nor BPD command staff can watch live footage. They can only track where officers are dispatched live. But we obtained emails from the Boise Police Union to its members from sources close to the union, showing the city told the union that OPA could, in fact, watch live footage. And this was several days after the meeting that they had with OPA. The union then told members they independently figured out that wasn't true and corrected their previous email. Records from that November meeting show since fall of 2021, the OPA has reviewed more than 8,000 random recorded body cam videos, but again, not live videos. The man in charge of holding the Boise Police Department accountable was fired this morning. The mayor and city council voted to remove Jesus Hara from his role as the director of the Office of Police Accountability. Only one council member voted against this decision. After an executive session, the mayor and every council member except Lucy Willits voted publicly to remove Hara, who's led the OPA since the summer of 2021. This comes 1 week after Hara was put on leave.
I move for council's approval that we remove Jesus Hara as director of the Office of Police Accountability effective immediately for the reason that we have lost confidence in Mr. Hara's ability to lead as OPA director.
I do not feel like this office was set up for success, and I could not in good conscience fire the director. I think what we've seen in the last couple months is that there's lots of things that have come up in the public where our policies do not align with what we want. And it's very clear to me that the city of Boise has a lot of work to do to make sure that the Office of Police Accountability, that our chief, that the leadership all are on the same page when it comes to what we expect of police.
Mayor Lauren McLean says they learned last month Hara was, quote, conducting unauthorized surveillance of community members. She goes on to say, I believe he was effectively exploiting his access for audits to the system by randomly viewing over 8,000 videos almost exclusively without cause, meaning without a complaint attached to them. But records show Hara and his staff do audits. They're open about that, and they randomly review recorded officer body camera footage as part of their oversight of the police department, part of their mission. OPA's ordinance doesn't say anything about not being able to do that. The ordinance says the office has, quote, full, unrestricted, and complete access to all information, files, evidence, or other material except as otherwise provided by law, which the director shall deem necessary in the performance of the duties specified and the responsibilities set forth. For background, 9 BPD staff members brought complaints about their former police chief to Hara and his staff early this year. That's why his name may sound familiar. After reviewing the complaints, Hara recommended the mayor place then Chief Ryan Lee on leave while a third party investigated. That never happened until KTVB made those complaints public in September, and the mayor asked Chief Lee to step down. Hara recently filed a complaint against the city. That was a photo you saw of him there. And today, his attorney says they now plan to sue the city. He said Hara is dismayed by today's bold retaliation in violation of Idaho's whistleblower laws. He says he's always acted in accordance with authorities given to him under the city ordinance.
The former Office of Police Accountability Director for Boise is now suing the city. Jesus Hara filed the lawsuit yesterday, alleging the city interfered in the investigation of former Boise Police Chief Ryan Lee. Hara says the city tried to prevent Boise police staff from coming forward with more complaints about their work environment. Lee later resigned at the request of Boise Mayor Lauren McLean after KTVB published a story about the former chief. Hara says in the lawsuit that the city became increasingly hostile towards him after the complaints were made public and that the city tried to form policies to influence the OPA. Hara later filed a grievance with the city on November 21st, accusing them of breaching his contract and violating city ordinances. A day later, his access to his evidence database was revoked. He was then placed on administrative leave, then fired by the city on December 9th for watching recorded body camera video that Mayor McLean said violated the privacy of the people of Boise. Hara is requesting his lawsuit go to a jury trial. His attorney has also requested a retraction for statements that Mayor McLean made to the media.
Another chapter in the epic story of Boise's City Hall, its former chief of police, its Office of Police Accountability, and its former director. A new lawsuit lays out the last year that led up to the removal of both.
We wanted to know what new information we have learned from this lawsuit, and she told us some of that has to do with how it outlines the nature of complaints against Chief Lee and his involvement with internal affairs.
We knew back in, I guess it would have been last month, in November, leading up to this firing of Jesus Hara, there was this complaint that he was overstepping his bounds, basically, that he was exceeding legislative authority. At the same time, he's failing to follow through with certain responsibilities. But what we didn't quite understand was that shortly after that, Hara also filed a grievance against the city, right?
Yeah, so Jesus filed a grievance against the city on November 21st, and then it says a day later, on November 22nd, all of his access to evidence databases were completely revoked with no warning. And that was retaliatory in his perspective because that was just happening a day later. And then the mayor, according to the lawsuit, accuses him of watching live body camera footage, which we know the union was also told by the city that he was doing that. And then the union figured out that it's not possible and that he could only audit recorded footage, which he can do under the city ordinance, right? And then, you know, December 2nd, he's placed on leave because McLean says there's concerns about the office. And then December 9th, he was fired because McLean said that he violated Boiseans' privacy by viewing this footage.
And there were claims of voyeurism on kids and watching, say, women involved in domestic violence situations.
Which it's interesting to note that body cam footage is actually subject to public records requests. So if you requested body camera footage, you could also see people in the video.
Like you or I could.
Me or you could do that. But he has more discretion with that. And that's his job to do. And that's what the ordinance gives him. His job to do is to access body camera footage. You know, Jesus said the complaints and the complaints against Lee were so severe that he expected them to find some sort of policy violation within their investigation that they said they did. But he said in the lawsuit, I don't even know if there was an investigation. The city told me that they contracted with a lawyer in February and they used that lawyer to do an investigation of this. but I can't find anything that says that he actually looked into it, and he won't return my calls. So I haven't found proof yet that this lawyer actually looked into it.